And we're live. Welcome back to the Survivor Global show on Reality Pop. I'm joined today by a man named Riley, all the way from Australia. And as you can see there, he's also known as Snuffed on YouTube. Riley, how are you today, my friend?
Not too bad, thanks, Chris. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thanks, mate. Not too bad for the middle of the week, to be honest, and we've got two great episodes to talk about today as well, which I'm really looking forward to getting into it with you because I know you're a bit of a super fan of Australian Survivor, and it's always good. You're actually only the second Australian person that we're talking to on this podcast about Australian Survivor, so I'm always interested in hearing the Australian perspective. And if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, did you mention that Australian Survivor was your introduction into Survivor prior to watching US?
That's right. Yeah. So I first got into the show through the first season of Australian Survivor in 2016. And from there, I mean, my obsession really snowballed. Became obsessed with US Survivor, New Zealand Survivor, South African Survivor. Yeah, looking forward to chatting about this one today.
I'm excited to talk to you about it, and specifically, there's not many people that I know that watch their own country's Survivor first before they become a fan of US. Like even myself, obviously, when I started watching Survivor, there was no Survivor South Africa, so the US was the only one that I knew. But a lot of people that I know, they would have seen the US show first, and even on this Australian Survivor season, we get a lot on this show about people doing a little bit of a shout out to the US Survivor, Harry with the little stick in his mouth, and saying, why do you do that? And he says, oh, it's a shout out to Nick Wilson from David versus Goliath, and the question being asked there, who's that guy? And he's like, oh, it's the person who won, which I thought was a brilliant little scene there that happens later in the second episode of these two that we'll be recapping. But before we get into the episode, Riley, I wanted to ask you about your own channel, Snuffed. How long have you been doing it, and what type of content do you do there that people can sort of expect to get if they were to go into your channel?
Yeah, so we started the channel about 6 months ago, and what we do over there, we basically do a lot of content. We do stories of different survivors, top 5 lists, season reviews, behind the scenes stuff as well. And at the moment, we've just begun a series on the journey to sole survivor of all 40 winners. Just today, we posted Sandra Vow's Twine's journey in the Pearl Islands, and there'll be new videos each week, 2 videos every week, Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, so you can join us over there.
Oh, great. Okay, well, there's a lot of content for people to go and dive into, I guess, while we're in the off season for Survivor US. So please go check out Riley's channel on Snuff. We're really happy to have you here, Riley. And getting into the actual episode, we see in the beginning part here the aftermath of the previous episode. So Sean comes back to camp with the Champions Tribe. He's now a champion. And there's a little bit of a fallout happening here because Sean's very happy. Daisy's extremely happy. She mentions, I've got my work husband back, but David and Luke, you can just see they're dejected and they're sitting alone in camp, just wondering, how did this happen? How did we lose control of this tribe? Because everybody loves Sean.
That's right. Yeah, the horse is back. He's ready to bolt out of the gates in the Champions Tribe with Daisy, Jono, and Andy is, back with his old Contenders Tribe mates. And yeah, we do see Luke and David being a little bit dejected here, especially given David kind of has to test the waters here, especially after what happened earlier in the season with the fake idol and giving that to Sean. So we're certainly going to see a lot of interesting dynamics here between those two.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, what makes Sean so great as the person that you want in your camp, because you see both camps here react very differently to losing Sean. Now, obviously, Sean's a physical beast. We all know that. He brings a lot to the challenges, but there's a lot of talk, from Daisy and also Janine on the other tribe saying that, he's someone that's just nice to have around and he brings a lot of positivity to the camp, and that how important do you think that vibe of being positive, being like a Sean, being someone like a John and Luke, that type of person, how important do you think this is in the game of Survivor?
That's right. I think with someone like Sean, you know that he is a physical threat, but he's also a very calming influence on the camp. And you don't have to worry about him like a David or a Luke or a Tony Vlachos in the US Survivor where they're running around. I suppose he's not going to cause any drama in camp, and he's always making good relationships. So he seems to be a really good player to have. And you really see that juxtaposition. It really is a tale of two cities between the champions and the contenders in this episode. The other tribe, having just lost Sean, are completely dejected. They're on the outs. They think it's all over for them. And then Daisy and Sean, they're happy, jovial as anything, ready to go.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, we see people talking on this tribe that we've never seen talking before on the TV show. In any case, you see Hannah on the beach next to Daisy, and those two were not in the same camp prior to Sean coming over. But suddenly they can agree on one thing: Sean's a great man, and he's dreamy to look at. And suddenly those two girls are bonding. David sees this. He's thinking to himself, I had everybody eating out of the palm of my hand in this tribe. I was running the show, and suddenly I've been relegated. I've been booted to the side because Sean's in the game now. And worst thing of all is you see David very much tiptoeing around Sean in this early stages because he doesn't know if Sean knows that the idol that he provided or gave him earlier in the show, if it's fake or if it's not fake. So David's trying everything to avoid him at this stage, right?
That's right. Yeah, Sean is really playing it up as though he still trusts David. He wants David to trust him because obviously, as we will see later, they're plotting a blindside to get David out and also flush that idol. So I think what Sean does here on the beach, taking David aside and saying, hey, thanks, I got your back, you got mine, it really does build this trust with David. And perhaps it's a false sense of security for him. We'll see this play out later down the line as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed seeing Sean play this way. I have not seen anything in Sean's game up until this point that showed me that he was actually thinking strategic about the game at all. And you mentioned quite rightfully earlier in this bit, you said that Sean's not someone you have to worry about that's going to go and strategize behind your back or potentially going to do all these blind sides. I think he is more predictable, but he's actually showing that, he realizes that the only way to take David out here is you've got to blindside him. You've got to make him feel like he's still okay with him. He goes to David, he talks to David, and David believes him at this stage. David's a crafty player. Watching this season for the second time around, there's a lot of things that I'm noticing, and we'll definitely go into this as we progress through this episode and then the next episode. Things that David do that I probably missed the first time I watched it, where I'm kind of like thinking to myself, there's certain times where David made better calls or better reads than Luke even, and I love Luke. So, saying that about Luke, that's crazy because Luke's the people's champion and he's my champion as well. But David did a few things really, really good in this season. The one thing that David is not really good at, though, self-awareness. He's just got he does have self-awareness, but he's just got too much confidence to the point where he just can't see how anybody would hate him. How would anybody see through his BS?
That's right. David really is controlling the game here, but it's interesting to see he is playing a really balls to the wall game, which I think could catch him later down the line. So he's kind of have to step very carefully at the moment and be careful to play that idol if he needs to do it. He is in a good position where both David and Luke have idols, but obviously they are outnumbered at the moment, 5-2. So yeah, certainly a dangerous position for David, but not the worst in the world.
Yeah, now we go to the Contenders Tribe here, and like I mentioned, Janine's a bit, she feels down she's been hit on two different fronts, she's saying. Like, firstly, I've lost Sean. He was a really positive, great person to have around camp. He was obviously someone he was out there winning challenges for them, and they could go to him. He's the person you'd want in your tribe when you're doing these challenges. But not only that, they've also discovered that they've got a new tribe mate who they've never known existed before in Dirty Harry. And Dirty Harry had the coming out episode possible in the previous episode where he came out in that tribal swinging for Janine, and he said Janine's the one running the show. He boldly mentioned that there's only 6 people playing the game at the moment who wants to win the game, and his whole strategy at this point has been, how do I become target number 1, enemy numero uno, so that they want to vote me out? And then this twist happens that I absolutely freaking hate. Why do we have this twist in the game, Riley?
This is one of the things that slightly annoys me about Australian Survivor. Look, unfortunately, they do have to fill out episodes in some way. They do have a 24-episode capita and obviously 24 castaways. Doesn't quite work out. But I think, actually, I don't mind this twist here compared to some others. I mean, getting the other tribe to vote Sean back onto their tribe, I think it's a great thing. It'll really shake things up. And I think I'm really glad that Sean and David are reunited because it is going to set up a very exciting moment here. But with Dirty Harry, we really have seen this new character, and it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts. I mean, he really has played a very grimy, very dirty game, especially in these last couple of episodes, obviously revealing that Oscar is not, in fact, real. And we really do see this new awakening and perhaps a massive rivalry we're setting up here between the godmother Janine and Dirty Harry.
No, I agree. And the thing is, when you look at this here, right, I feel like everything Dirty Harry has done up until this point, I give him kudos. I give him a 10 out of 10 if I could as a judge, because, Janine is clearly rattled. Janine is someone that now knows that the target is firmly and squarely on her. And this guy, Harry, who she now calls Dirty Harry, is the one who's directing all of this heat towards her. And I think that she's kind of playing into his hand. Even later on in the game, when we go into the tribal, which we'll talk about in episode 2, I really feel like Harry is getting psychologically the better of Janine at this point. And Janine is firmly focused on Harry as her number one target. She's not thinking, how can I work with him? She's not seeing a potential threat of the idol being out there. She doesn't believe he's got it. So I really feel like there's a lot of things I don't remember in Janine's game where she was like being oblivious to certain really big warning signs. And, it kind of reminded me of how Sandra played Russell in Heroes versus Villains, when Sandra said, Coach is coming after you, and she turned Russell against Coach, and it just worked that perfectly. I feel like Harry is playing Janine. Janine is a powerhouse in this game. She's got influence, but Harry is actually outplaying her at this point.
It is very interesting to see Janine a little bit rattled, because obviously outside of the game, she's this businesswoman, this very straight, very calm and influence. But to see Harry really getting under his skin, I wouldn't say Dirty Harry's the best nickname. Maybe Cockroach is a better nickname. So he really is digging in. He's really getting in there, and infecting the tribe. He's causing it to spread all this paranoia.
Yeah, 100%. Have you ever watched Janine on Shark Tank over in Australia? I've never watched it myself, but I'm just interested if you've seen her on that.
I've watched a couple episodes here and there, but probably not enough to get her personality per se. She does seem though to be very straight and narrow with you. But she is pretty shifty as well. And I think, as we see later, she's not the godmother, the boss of the tribe, the King Don. She is a team player. And that's what we'll see later in the game.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's different styles of how you can manage people to get what you want. But I think Harry is definitely aware that she's probably the one that is still directing it strategically in the way that she wants it to go. Like, if you're a really good leader, you can go out there and make the plan, everybody's plan, but there's still someone in that group that needs to be the visionary. And I feel like Janine is the visionary. She's the one that's actually shaping the strategy and shaping the direction that they should go in this game. And we'll definitely get into that at a later stage as well. Now, the immunity challenge, we see all of the champions come out with the little stick in their mouth, and Harry saying, he loves it. It's quite, flattering to see all of them walking out there. It clearly shows how much of an impact Harry had on that champions tribe in the previous tribal, because they were sitting there front row seat, and they would have gotten the uncut 1 hour, 2 hour version of that tribal where we only saw maybe 15 minutes of it.
That's right. Harry is certainly a massive influence on the other tribe. And you look at Simon, he really is running scared here. Getting the tribe motivated. The morale is so low. They need a win here, and it's going to be really important for them. I mean, we haven't really seen Simon up until this point. He's sort of like Jimmy Johnson, really embracing that role as the former AFL captain. He won 3 premierships in Brisbane. So it's good to see him really coming out of his shell here and commanding the tribe.
I was surprised to see that, because you're right. We haven't seen anything of Simon up until this stage. And he's been extremely quiet. And whenever he has spoken, it's all been about, we need strong people in the tribe for strength and that. And I'm wondering if it is because for the first time in both of these tribes that he's been in up until this point, he is really the alpha. Where in previous tribes, there have been either the Sean with him or E.T. was with him previously. So he probably took a step back in some ways to some of those guys. And maybe that's why we haven't seen it. But we really see him rally the troops, get them together, really sort of take that leadership role on, because they know that they're going to need to bring something special into this challenge now that they've lost the horse, they've lost Sean, the person who's been winning all of these challenges for them. And we see it play out in this specific challenge where they have to go through the challenge. They got to collect these balls, go over a cargo net, go underneath a net in the water, which I thought was pretty hard. I do Spartan races for fun, the obstacle course races, and just going underneath one of those nets when it's on ground is hard enough. When you're doing it in water and you're gasping for air and you're trying to get up there for air, I can only imagine that it's not something very fun to do and pleasant, right?
It doesn't look fun at all, but this challenge does have a lot of moving parts. Obviously, we have the first crawl over to gather the ball, and then, as you mentioned, the net, and also the massive tower. It is a really interesting choice, I think, here to have Andy and David throwing. Now, I'm not sure how much hand-eye coordination Andy has as a golf journalist, but it certainly didn't look to be like that much, especially when compared to Simon and Ross as well. I mean, he's a bloody fish, isn't he? He was only there for like 30-odd seconds, if not more.
Like, listen, anything that Ross does when it's a water challenge, like, in US Survivor, if you had to choose one US Survivor to go up against one Australian Survivor in a water challenge, you're thinking that it's Aussie and Ross. They're probably going to be the two people that are going to go at it, because, and obviously Shane Gold is pretty good as well, but I feel like Ross, just an absolute machine when it comes into the water. And the amount of time that he stuck down there, he nearly did this whole thing in one go without having to get out, and that was impressive. And like you quite rightfully said, Simon, the way that he was pinpoint accuracy throwing those balls in there, that was impressive. And the champions really just got everything wrong here. They had the wrong people up there throwing. I don't blame them for having Andy up there, because up until this point, Andy has been put into these clutch roles, and he's actually been delivering. And we're going to talk about Andy's game quite a bit later on, because I've got my theories on Andy as a player up until this point after having watched this season again. And challenges is actually one of the things he's done extremely well at, but that did not look easy. And I wonder if it is because Andy is not the biggest guy out there. It looked like he needed a bit of arm strength to actually get it there, because the distance was ridiculous trying to get those.
It did look pretty far. It looked, 15 to 20 meters almost. And especially at that trajectory, coming from this massive tower down into this tiny net with the smallest gap. And when Luke's under there, he's not holding it for too long. So there is very little room to succeed. Whereas on the other tribe, I mean, Simon, an ex-AFL player, he was always just going to gun them in. He got 4 in the first go, which was just ridiculous to see how well they did there.
I was surprised Simon didn't actually do as an AFL player, he didn't do the volleyball hit into there, pinpoint accuracy.
That's right. The handball punched the ball through. It might have worked, but I think in a challenge like this, when you need that win, why risk it?
Yeah, don't be a showboat if you don't have to, right? Matt can learn something from this, because Matt keeps trash talking throughout both of these episodes. Ultimately, you see the Contenders Tribe winning this against all odds, because it came down to something that's a bit of a circus trick or a very unique skill there at the end. And you see Matt going off saying, "Who's smiling now? Who's smiling now?" And he keeps doing that. And I wrote down on my notes here, Matt is not playing the winning game. He's definitely didn't read the book about how to make friends and influence people before going on to Survivor.
Yeah, he definitely does remind me of someone like Debbie, who will always, no matter what they say, rub the tribe the wrong way. Yeah, I don't think he's got the best social game at the moment, but he certainly does bring the laughs and the entertainment here.
Yeah, so we move on to the pre-tribal phase of this episode, and it was one of the shorter episodes because we didn't get a reward challenge. I actually felt like, having that 55 minutes or so in there and it not being over an hour's worth of runtime was perfect, because we got to see a lot of strategizing and scrambling going on before the actual tribal. But we do know at this point that David and Luke are still feeling like they're in a good place. They feel like they've pulled Sean in as the 5th person in that tight 4 alliance that they've got with John and Daisy. I think effectively thinking they've booted Andy out of that spot, because Andy was trying to get in there before. And Sean is very smart here. He gets Daisy to work with David, because he's aware that Daisy and David have had a good relationship, and that Daisy is probably the best person to pitch who they should vote for, which is Hannah in this case, because Hannah just isn't holding it up in the tribals, or she's not holding it up in the challenges, and that's the easy vote here. Hannah's feeling not so well in camp. She's got the stomach pain that she's got, and David is pouncing on that because he thinks, I can see blood in the water.
And what we saw earlier in the episode with Sean as well, I think really reinforces that, making Sean think that he is still on David's side. We do see something interesting here where Sean is after David, but oblivious, David thinks that Hannah is going home. And I think they really do play this off well until, of course, we see Andy come to the water, though. And I think that's where things start to get a little bit shaky.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get into that. And I feel like, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how Sean works here, because we don't give Sean a lot of credit, and we probably won't have many opportunities in this season to give him credit. But, one of the things that I feel like he's doing really well here is he's splitting up his resources. He gets Daisy to go out and handle the boys, and he goes to work on the people that are on the actual beach, which is the right way to do this. This is how you want to split people up so they don't know that there's other conversations going on. I think there's a bit of a tactic to this, what a lot of people just don't know how to do it correctly, but you need that second person there that you can trust to help you split them up. And he goes and talks to Baden and he talks to John, and both of them are on board. And I was quite surprised because we've seen up until this point how John has actually bonded with both Luke and with David. But I think the thing comes down to Sean just telling, like, listen, he's basically given me a fake idol. I think he actually brings that up in the next episode, but I'm sure that conversation must have happened between John and Daisy, because John and Daisy is his right-hand people at this stage in the game. And by splitting them up and having this conversation, he locks everything into the point where David feels 100% comfortable. He doesn't think anybody's coming for him. And like you mentioned, we see Andy do something here before, and I don't know how many times this has happened in Survivor off the top of my dome right now, but we definitely saw this with Tony Vlachos happening close to the end of Winners of War, where he pulls Jeremy aside 5 minutes before Tribal, and he says to Jeremy, they're coming for you, kid. You need to change your vote, which doesn't give Jeremy much of an opportunity to actually go and fact check. And Andy instinctively does the right thing here. Now, we all look at this as Andy being crazy probably because he's going against this alliance, but from Andy's perspective, I feel like he's one of those players that he's got all the right tools there. He knows what he needs to do to execute and play the game. But the one thing he just does not have is people's trust.
That's right. And I think Andy does ultimately want to go with David and Luke. So he does suggest that Daisy should go home, puts that to David and Luke, perhaps not realizing how close David and Daisy actually are. But I think it's a good target for him to set, though, because Daisy is really probably the third to David and Luke here. And it probably does, by getting Daisy out, it probably puts him in a better position to go further in the game with those two. I'm certainly not sure how good of a move it was that early before Tribal Council, whether that's just the edit showing it as being a last-minute decision or not. But certainly when we get to Tribal Council, though, things explode.
Yeah, things explode, definitely, certainly. And I think the thing here is that, in his mind, you're right. I want to explore the whole thing. He went for Daisy because he knew that Daisy, and he must have known that Daisy and David are pretty close, but Daisy is sitting, she's that wedge in the middle. So I did look at that and think to myself, that's the right person to go for there, because Sean and David have got this alpha male thing going on. We both wants to be the alpha. They're never going to work together. So I feel like that's the right approach. But definitely, this throws everything up in the air, because David and Luke would have been blindsided here if they didn't know about it. So Andy makes a bigger target out of himself here by telling them. But in my opinion, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? So if you're in the game and you're trying to play to win the game, you can either sit back and become one of those players that we complain about, like we never see them on the confessionals, Simon, or you could be someone that actually makes something. You could try and make a move, try and take control of the game. So yes, I get that at the end of the day, if we're only results focused, it doesn't play out for Andy in this case. But I'm going to make the defense that he actually did the right things here. And I feel like David and Luke made the mistake of not listening to him. But I still want to know, why is it that people don't trust Andy, but they will work with David a little bit more, even though they know he's a snake as well? And I've got my theory of why I think that happens, but I'd be interested to know if you sort of think there's a specific reason for it.
Andy does come across as very slimy, I suppose. He's not really too into everyone's social games, whereas David, I feel, is a lot closer to everyone. He's a bright light around camp, and I do wonder whether everyone is viewing Andy as this strictly game player, whereas David is here to play the game and also to make friends. Really, I don't think he is. But no, I certainly think it is crazy how no one trusts Andy at this point. What is he going to do? He is making some great moves. I think perhaps some big moves that don't need to be done this early in the game. But I certainly think against David, though, if David's making the moves, Andy might as well play as well, and he should damn well try as hard as he can.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, at the end of the day, you look at this, from Andy's perspective, he's lost this right-hand person in Sam, one of the people he's worked very close with, and he's not in the same tribe as Harry, but he's also not showing the patience of being in the end. And the big thing for me, the no-brainer here is that they're going to lose another contender if they go the way that Andy wants them to go here. He's putting a lot of trust in David, that David will rope him in with whatever alliance he's got on the other side. He doesn't even know what the dynamic really is. David will tell him, like, the girls love me. But both me and you know that the girls really don't have much love for David on that other Contenders tribe. So he's putting a lot of faith in David. So you're right, it is too early. You don't know the dynamics in the other tribe. You're not in the merge yet. People in Australian Survivor will forget the moves you've made pre-merge because it's that far ago, like long ago. You're 50 days into this game. You know what I mean? They're not going to remember what happened pre-merge. When you need to wake up in Australian Survivor and really play the game is after merge, I would say. That's what most of the winners are doing at this stage.
That's right, at this stage. But it does seem like the style of play in Survivor is beginning to shift. You are seeing players like Dirty Harry, or the Cockroach, as I like to call him, and David as well. They are playing a very aggressive game early in the game, which we haven't seen prior in Australian Survivor. I mean, the previous winners have all been very under-the-radar, subtle social players who haven't made big moves until late in the game, even if they have made big moves or not. So I certainly think it's interesting that we are seeing this level of gameplay, especially compared to previous seasons. And it really is Andy, Luke, Dirty Harry, Janine, and David leading the way here.
Now, Hannah's whole gameplay here is that she's going to play possum and she's going to pretend like, I'm the one going home, I'm negative, I'm sad, all this kind of stuff. She's going to throw that out there and probably could have worked. Like it sounded like it was working up until this point, but she goes into this in the tribal and she continues to play the whole thing of, I don't know what's happening. It could be me today. And Jonathan saying, well, you've been telling us you're at the bottom every single tribal. And she's like, well, legitimately, I have not been voting the right way, which is fair. Jonathan also talks to Sean and says, how does it feel like being in this tribe? And, Sean's happy because he's back with his group of people that he really cares for and wants to play the game with, being Daisy and John, I believe, is his two ride or dies in this situation. So he's extremely happy to be there. So it's a lot of kumbaya going on. There's a bit of questions asked to Luke and David in regards to, will the vote be a straightforward one? Luke said, well, he was under the impression that it was going to be one person. And Jonathan picks up on that very, very cleverly and says, what do you mean you were under the impression? So already making people wonder and worry about it because it sounds like Luke is getting onto it at this stage.
That's right. It does seem like Hannah sort of oversells that story there that she's the one going home because, I mean, as far as she knows, David's the one going and she's not going home. So what we see here, I really think she's overplaying her hand. And I do wonder, is it good to come into a tribal council and say, you're going home, I'm completely content with going home? I think the only time that's actually worked is when Sierra said she was going home in Tocantins. And, I mean, she thought she was going home. Everyone thought she was going home, but little did they know Tyson went home instead. So it does seem bizarre that Hannah is selling that so hard. And we do see that David pulls out his idol here and he sort of flexes on the rest of the tribe and says, hey, you better rethink your strategy here.
Yeah, and touching back on Hannah, Hannah's a police officer, right? And I noticed that again on this one. And we compare Hannah to Tony Vlachos. We compare her to Sarah Lucina. Why is it that the police officer in Australia can't pull it off? Because I feel like this is the second season in a row. There was a police officer, I forgot his name, the season before as well. They just got outed early. Yeah, so he got outplayed early on. Why is it you'd expect the police officer to have the skills to come in there and to be able to, read people, understand how to work in certain social dynamics and certain social situations where they get people to want to work with them. That's part of their job, to diffuse situations, to get people on their side, to be a member of the community that goes out there and does all these extraordinary things, that makes people like Tony and Sarah very dangerous, to the point if you get another police officer playing over in America, they'll have a massive target on their head if they're honest about the fact they're a police officer in any case. But with Hannah, it doesn't seem like it's coming together. She is never really seen as someone that spends a lot of time with people outside of her circle. Like, to me, it looked like she very much just spent time with the Contenders. I never saw her socialize with Dave or with Luke during this period at all, prior to the trial.
Yeah, she does seem to be very much in her shell at the moment. I'm not sure if that's the way Hannah is outside of the game, or if she's just, struggling from not eating food. And she does seem to be sick at this stage as well. We haven't really seen her strategize at all or really be that much of a social force. I mean, outside of Sammy and Casey on the old Contenders Tribe, I don't really think of any allies she possibly had in the game.
No, I definitely didn't see it. And maybe there was some things, like I'd like to give her the benefit of the doubt. But the one thing I feel like from the little bits of airtime that I've seen from her and her body language and how she comes across, she doesn't seem like someone that very easily socializes with a bunch of different people. She does seem like someone that's a bit of an introvert, a little bit. And again, I could be completely wrong. Like an edit could make you look one way. Think about Nick being the creepy stalker and Winners at War, always popping in last minute in the scenes. And we know he's not that kind of guy. So they could do anything. But I'm just not getting the feeling like she's putting 1+1 together here and getting it to equal 2, in this whole scenario. But, like you said, Dave pulls out the idol and Jonathan notices it and he says, I didn't see that there. And then Dave, being the gamesman that he is, he starts whispering over to Luke and they start having this conversation. And we mentioned it in the previous podcast as well. I love the whispering. I know there's a lot of thing in the US Survivor where people don't like it, but again, I love it here because we see what's being said, we see the subtitles, so we're feeling like we're a part of the conversation. And what I picked up here with the back and forth conversation happening between Dave and Luke is that Dave is actually willing to slit Daisy's throat at this point. He is actually believing what Andy is saying, and I think that Andy got through to him a lot more than what he led us to believe in some of the episodes or the confessionals prior to this episode. Basically, he's saying like, listen, I feel like Andy is right. I feel like they're all going for one of us, or they might split the vote on us. We should vote for Daisy. But Luke is the one here. Luke is the one that's saying to him, I don't trust Andy. We should not put the votes on Daisy. Let's not do that. And that's when, the whole vote gets shifted over to Sean, which I think is a fatal flaw here. If we're going to be honest and look at this episode, it's a flaw because ultimately the vote goes to Sean, to Hannah, 0 votes for Dave because he placed the idol correctly. Kudos to him. Luke burns his idol in this case, which I don't blame him. Definitely he was getting nervous. Dave was nervous, so it made him play the idol. But ultimately Luke's decision to pull David back from voting on Daisy means that they end up losing Hannah, which is not beneficial to either Luke's game or David's game at this stage.
That's right. I don't think the target on Sean is the best choice here. I really think Daisy is the better choice. I mean, we still are a while away from the merge coming, so we do need that strengthening challenges. And also, as far as David knows, Sean trusts him. Sean thinks he's got a real idol. He thinks he's got the real deal. But I mean, little does David know that Sean actually doesn't trust him. I don't mind it in that if we get Sean, it removes any sort of paranoia in terms of Dave's game and exposing that fake idol, exposing that fraud. But certainly it does stuff up the votes here, and ultimately we'll go to a rebate between Sean and Hannah.
Yeah, exactly. If they stuck to it, the vote would have gone through. The 3 votes would have been on Sean, not Sean, on Daisy, and she would have been gone. And like I said, Andy made the right decision here. Andy in the next episode, early on in the next episode, is super frustrated here. And I feel for him. Like, I'm there with him. I'm like, I would be frustrated as well. Like, he's doing everything right in his mind. He's putting all these great plans together, but it's just not happening for him on the day.
That's right. He's adding up 2 and 2, and it's coming to 3 at the moment. I mean, he's been exposed for being a snake and voting Daisy. I mean, it really just isn't working out for him. No, none of the contenders trust him anymore. And now the champions, well, they might have a little bit more trust, but, they're down in numbers as well. David and Luke have completely burned their idols. What's going on with Andy's game? He's completely screwed at this point.
Yeah, I feel like, if Andy was in that tribe with Harry, I feel like we would have seen different gameplay here. I feel like, the big leg up on Andy, like there's a few things that went wrong for Andy in this game. And, up until this point, he's coming up against 2 players that are tier 1 level players in Australian Survivor, in Luke and in David. So to go up against both of them at the same time, that's a tough ask for anybody to do. And then secondly, he does not have his ride or die there, someone that can work with him. If he had Harry, who he has been working with early in the Contenders Tribe, I feel like that could have been a very different dynamic for him. And I really feel like he's just getting outplayed by better players here, and he's just got no one he can work with here, no one he can bounce ideas off. He thought that David would be that person. He was banking on the fact that he could pull David in. But David clearly is more loyal to Luke. He listens to Luke. But we do see Luke here quite annoyed with himself, which he should be. He played his idol, he burned it, and he said, I've waited all this time to get an idol to play it like that, and he's disgusted with himself. But he does say that this is the opportunity now for him to launch a comeback.
That's right. Yeah, Luke is in a good position here with David. Obviously David's been exposed, as we will see when Sean reveals to David in passing that he has been given a fake idol. He's been sold a lemon. David's a used car salesman here, Brian Heidick of Australian Survivor. And we'll draw parallels with Brian and David later, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, Luke really is. He's played this role. He's burned this. He's waited so long for this moment, and now he's screwed. You know, there's still only 2 champions against the 4 contenders remaining. I don't know how it plays out from here, but certainly it does seem like Luke is in danger.
Yeah, it's actually sitting at 5-2, I believe, at this stage. There's still a lot of players in this game, so they're really at a disadvantage going into the next tribal. But you're right. Like, I mean, some explosive stuff happens here. Sean finally is going to be straight up, and you've got to ask yourself, is it the right thing to do at this stage? Like, should Sean have already made David aware? Or the one thing I did write down, Sean makes half of it aware. Like, he makes the truth known about the fact that David sold him a lemon, like you said. But should he have gone that extra mile and really tried to drive a wedge in between the champions? Because he did say to the guys when he first joined that tribe that the champions are tied on that other side. They're not going to split. They're going to work together with these boys when they can't come back into the merge, and we need to break that up. So I feel like what he could have done is he's missed an opportunity to say, the reason I know this is because Janine sold you out.
Yep. I think it is a dangerous game, though, to split David and Luke. I don't think they're separated at all. I really think they are conjoined at the hip at the moment. But yeah, no, I think Sean played it off pretty well, though, by not completely exposing him, not completely making drama, but really making David feel on edge. David feels like he's in trouble. And certainly if the champions go back to Tribal Council, David is certainly going to be on the block for sure.
Yeah, but like we see, though, a nervous Dave is a very dangerous Dave. He's a one that will scramble to get the next idol, and we're going to see that happen throughout the episode. But I really still feel like there was an opportunity missed here, because if you outed the fact that Janine was the one that sold Dave down the river, that creates that little bit of animosity between Dave and Janine, because Dave still feels like he's really solid in with the girls to the point where he'll later on talk to them about potentially throwing something or letting them know he's in danger. But you know, you need to break that champions tribe up. You need to break that cohesion that has developed there, because the contenders are all over the place. They've backstabbed each other left, right, and center when they should have stayed together. And it's going to be very hard to get the contenders to work together at the merge. I really feel like they should have taken the opportunity to say, Dave, your own people sold you down the river here, mate.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad move to make, I think. Yeah, so certainly splitting up that trust between Janine and David and making David really scramble to find new allies in the game. It does shake up that because, yeah, we do see that the contenders are a little bit fractured. We do have Dirty Harry on the other side, obviously being close with Andy. But other than that, you know, I don't really think they are as solid as the champions. I mean, you see that 3 over on the Contenders Tribe between Janine, Abby, and Pia. They're solid. Simon is locked in. Ross is ready to go. I mean, you only need to pull over Luke and David, and I mean, the contenders are done in the game.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I would have thought they needed something there to really split these champions up, because the champions are a cohesive unit, especially because on the other side, they've not had to turn on each other for ages. So that 5 are extremely solid together, and there's no worries on their end. But we go to the Contenders Tribe, and we see Janine waking up, saying that she's really, you know, getting used to island life. Day 23, she really loves her peace and tranquility, and loves taking everything in. And there's this funny scene with Ross walking up to her, saying, "Hey, look at the fish." And she's like, "Yeah, I see the fish." And he takes a rock or a stone and he throws it straight into the water to break her tranquility. And you see the difference in their characters and how Ross doesn't read that situation as well. I just found it really funny.
You can't not love Ross. He is such a fun character to have on the show. I mean, he really is just everywhere. He's just this little gremlin that gets in and has the most fun he can possibly have. And we do see an interesting scene with Ross when he's taking in the tranquility, unlike what he did with Janine throwing the rock in the water, all by himself, you know, just looking at the ocean, analysing the waves, seeing if there's any massive sets out there that he can ride in. And Casey comes along and she starts to have a chat with Ross. And he seems really pissed off that she's around.
Yeah, it's really giving us the whole setup throughout this whole episode is Casey trying to work her way in with different individual people within that alliance. And I wrote down at the end there, Casey reminds me of that person or that girl that will agree with you on everything, no matter who you are. Like, you know, you say, oh, you know, I love footy. Yeah, I love footy as well. Like, oh, I love having coffees in the morning. Yeah, I love footy, having coffee in the morning. And if she goes to the next person and someone else says, I hate coffee in the morning, she'd be like, yeah, I hate coffee in the morning. She just seems too agreeable with everything that these guys are saying. And for me, I think that's the thing that really puts them off, because they feel like she's being fake.
Yeah, that's right. She does seem a little bit fake. And even with her interactions with the three girls, Janine, Pia, and Abby as well, she doesn't seem to be in cohesion with the rest of the tribe, sort of similar to how Hannah was treated on the Champions as well. She doesn't really seem to have anyone there that she can really trust, because much like Andy, she's not really clicking with anyone at all here.
Yeah, and I just want to make it clear to anyone listening or watching this, we mean like she looks fake or seems fake as the game player trying to stay in Survivor. I'm sure Casey is a lovely girl in real life, and it's easy for us to sit out here and judge these people that are playing this game in this high stressful environment, but who knows how we would have really reacted if we were out there. And I feel like a lot of the things that she's trying to do is the right instincts to try and get in with the bigger alliance. Again, similar to Andy, it's just the execution isn't there, and she's just not executing on it in a way where it's being received really well from that Contenders side.
That's right. And we go to the reward challenge with the monkey bars. And it's a bit of a fun one. I really would love to do this challenge. We have monkey bars and a flag at the end, and we have to race to get there.
Yeah, I love the monkey bars. As soon as I saw it, reminded me of doing the obstacle course races. A lot of the Australian Survivor challenges reminds me of different obstacle course races I would normally do and have fun with. And I did write down like everybody challenging each other here. You've got Matt and Luke going up against each other like they've been doing the whole season. Matt ends up blitzing Luke. I don't know. I feel like he misjudged one of the rungs and he just completely missed it and ended up landing in the water. But the funniest one for me is, again, Ross being that kid that he is. He really gives Andy a go, but then when he gets into the water, he's trying everything in his book to play dirty and get Andy off that bar by throwing water in his face from the bottom while he's trying to get to the flag, and it was just hilarious to watch.
Ross really is the most chaotic player on this season, but he is so much fun while he's doing it. He really is like a kid in the ball pit at the moment, just having the most fun he can possibly have, doing whatever he wants. This is Ross's island. No one else is, he's having fun. He doesn't care about the game around him. He's just going to ride the wave all the way to the end.
Yeah, and it's funny because in the next challenge we get the excuse that it was more suited to physical men or that type of thing, but I really think this one was suited to men because you need that upper body strength more so than the balance one that follows in the immunity challenge. Because when you look at Baden and Abby going up against each other, in no world would you have thought that the most skinniest guy and probably not the most athletic guy out there would absolutely beat somebody like Abby, who is an athlete in her life. It's how she makes her living. But he absolutely blitzes her through that course, which was impressive to see. But I think, again, it shows that this was definitely a challenge that was more suited towards men than women. And I feel like having a guy go up against the female in this one, probably a bit unfair, to be honest.
Yeah, a little bit, but I mean that's the way the numbers are playing out at the moment. But we do see earlier in the challenge when the contenders find out that Hannah has gone home, and Maddie makes a really funny comment here, and he says that Hannah was about as useless as a torn Ugg boot in challenges. I just love that. I mean, we're only seeing a little bit of these episodes, so we can't read too much into how these players are playing. But I mean, I just find Maddie's comments are just so funny, just to see how he reacts to everything. It's just been great so far.
Yeah, Maddie to me comes across as the ultimate recruit person that they got onto Australian Survivor. Someone that's never seen any Survivor seasons. All he heard was, you go to live out on an island, try and survive for 50 days. You're going to be able to do a lot of challenges. It's going to be all about survival. And that's what he thought this game was going to be about. Because, to me, he comes into, he's a brilliant character. I'm actually gutted. Spoiler alert for those that haven't seen All-Stars. We don't see him back on All-Stars. We probably had too many players from the season come back for All-Stars already, but he's definitely a player I wouldn't hate to see back in Survivor, because I do feel like, he's not the kind of player that's going to go quietly. You're going to see a lot of him. He's going to be fighting in those challenges. He's going to have things to say, like this. And it's also one of the reasons why I feel like Australian Survivor sometimes can be more fun, because you do have a large amount of recruits playing this game. You don't just have super fans, game bots playing this game that knows, I need to make this move right now to be correct. Imagine if you had 22 or 24 Andy's out there playing the game. That's sometimes how American Survivor can get in these later seasons because they're going for so many super fans, and that means that there's less people making mistakes like Matt is making, and it's fun to watch. It's fun to see somebody's game imploding. Like his game, to me, must be at an all-time low at the moment. If anybody had to ask everyone who's the person that's the most likely to win, from what I'm seeing in the edit, I don't think he's very high.
Yeah, he really is fun in every way to get under everyone's skin and really, burn his position in this tribe. But I mean, this reward challenge that the champions ultimately win is really one of the greatest I think we've seen, possibly in the entire series across the world. It really is great. We get the Survivor Cinema, and David and Luke are on the outs, and they get a note here saying that they have the option to pick who goes first in what order. This is a private cinema screening, and John really, really screws up here, and he says, Dave's got kids. Why don't we let him go first? And oh my gosh, Andy says it. That is the most idiotic move you could make. David and Luke have just played 2 idols. There's going to be one in the reward for sure. Why are you going to give him the first chance to find it?
To be honest with you, I loved it the first time it happened. I loved it the second time it happened. I'm all for it. I love it. And it's proving my point of what I've just said. It's great to have recruits on this show of Australian Survivor. It's great to see people make absolute rookie mistakes because they're clearly not fans of the show, or they're clearly not fans. Maybe John watched some of the Australian Survivor seasons because, some of the Australian Survivor seasons have been slow up till this point. It's been the first 2 seasons was a lot around mateship and things like that. But I don't think he's a big fan. I don't think he's watching all that many seasons. He doesn't get what the different mistakes are that you can make. He doesn't get the fact that there's probably an idol out there. Like David, very smart, similar to Andy, realizes that if it's going to mean one person goes at a time, there's 100% going to be an idol hidden somewhere. There's 100% going to be a clue at the very least being hidden there somewhere, so he picks up on that. And Daisy goes around to agree with it. She thinks it's a brilliant idea, and she gives the numbers for who goes when. And she's like, David, you're first. So enemy number 1 gets to go first and have a cheeky look. And we see David absolutely going nuts in there, looking through the popcorn, opening the popcorn up, spilling it everywhere, ultimately finding it. You talk about Ross being a funny character and just being the life of the party and having that kid-like spirit. David and Luke comes close second and third to that for me.
David really has so much fun here. I liken him a little bit to Taz the Tasmanian Tiger from the Looney Tunes. He really just rips everything up here. He tears up the carpet. He lifts up the sofa. He opens the bloody popcorn machine and it all falls out on the floor, and then ultimately puts his hand in and pulls away the idol. I mean, he was just having the time of his life, going through everything, shoving his face in the popcorn, dancing with his MC Hammer Pants. I mean, David was just really on top of the world right now. I mean, he's gone from the rock bottom to finding the idol, and now he's about to have the most fun of his life. He's shoving down the cornettos, and then he returns to the other tribe mates by crying, by acting, playing up the Meissner technique and making them think that he's so sad. He's seen his family, he's missing so much, when really inside he is excited to go. He's got the idol and he's ready to make some big moves.
Yeah, I'm just laughing at it so hard, and everybody is just snowed and they're believing him, and it's a really good bit of passage of play there by David. Now we go on to the immunity challenge, and this is the one that's going to be quite controversial, right? Because you see that it's an endurance challenge, and prior to going to this immunity challenge, David told Simon after that reward challenge that, listen, I'm in trouble, and I'm probably going to go next. Some games have been blown up. Janine and Abby are seen discussing this on the island. Janine and Abby and PR and obviously Simon and Ross, we probably didn't see all 4 or 5 of them talking together. They come to the conclusion that they need to save David, which I found extremely interesting. And Janine does say here that she's not a fan of David, but Luke has shown her nothing but trust and loyalty at this stage. So I feel like it's more, let's save Luke than what it is save David, because she was more than willing to throw David under the bus a couple of episodes ago when she told Sean that David gave him a fake idol. She was okay to burn him at that stage. So what has changed?
That's right. I think the mood really has shifted here, especially after Sean left the Contenders as well. I mean, the champions, they need numbers going into the merge. It's quickly approaching. And the contenders on the Contenders Tribe compared to Janine and her posse, they can't really be trusted. I mean, Dirty Harry has completely exposed himself to be this cockroach that won't die. He's going to create all these lies and create mayhem. We have Maddie, who is clearly not a good social player at all, as much fun as he is. And then we have Casey as well, who has proved to be, just like Hannah, useless in challenges. And really, she's struggling here. She's not making any friends. So they have disposable players here. And I think better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
Yeah, and it's the right move at this stage, right? You have to cut. You have to cut these guys right now. You've got to get the numbers back together. I criticized Janine's game a couple of episodes ago because of the fact that she was willing to burn David so early in the game. But she's finally coming to it, and she's realizing I need numbers going into the next stage of the game. I can't lose both David and Luke. Like I said, I feel like Luke is the person they more so want to save in this situation. But we go into this challenge, and, it's a balancing challenge. Ending up with a wooden gutter being between two people with a ball on it that you need to balance. And Harry puts his name forward and he really wants to do this challenge, even though he's not someone that's great at balancing, and he's sat out on some balancing challenges before this. He's saying, no ways am I putting my game in the hands of other people here. I'm going to play it. But one by one, the champions go out. And Harry notices that the last two people that were actually still standing on there trying to give it a go was himself and Matt. Dead giveaway.
That's right. And I don't think it was the best decision to have Harry and Pia opposite each other. I don't really think Harry had much of a say in that, though. But, I mean, those opposite heights really didn't work. I mean, the champions, they really weren't struggling too much at all. And I did find that Jono made a really funny comment here with Jono, the other Jono, JLP to John Easto. He said that John's sweating profusely, and John replies by saying, is that really what you want to say? Because we know how much JLP likes balls at this stage. I think John was thinking that he was more sweating balls than sweating profusely. A bit posh by JLP, I think.
That is really funny. That is really, really funny. And I didn't even pick that up the first time I watched it at all. Now, pre-tribal, we see Casey going to work here, and she's running in between the alliance of Harry and Matt, the previous contenders, in between the champions, trying to figure out, where the vote's going to go. She actually goes to them and she says, Harry's got an idol. She gives Harry away here. And Harry's done everything in his power at this point to make himself target number one. Everybody wants to vote for him. Everything's going according to Harry's master plan here because he's going to play the idol. He's going to be safe. All Casey's got to do is stay quiet and go with it. But she's running back and forth. But still, the champions do not believe her. They think that, no, she's just coming here. She's that person that's going to be running in between and trying to throw us off the scent. And they don't trust her at all. It's an interesting dynamic.
That's right. And we have discussed earlier that she is not so much fake outside of the game, but in the game, no one's really trusting her. She's really saying yes to everyone. And to really be going in between these two different alliances and trying to play the middleman, it doesn't really work out here for her. I mean, even the contenders are starting to lose faith in her because she's going back and forth. The champions didn't really trust her to begin with. And now, as we see, it's really setting up this David versus Goliath battle, much to Harry's. Harry loves that fact. He's the Nick Wilson in this case. He's ready to take on Janine, the godmother. It really is setting up a big stage. Harry has the idol. Janine just refuses to believe it, which to me is just ludicrous. I mean, there's idols out there. How crafty Harry is. Even if it is a lie, you've got to take it into account. The champions have the numbers here. I mean, don't completely write it off.
Yeah, I was absolutely amazed to see her just writing it off. For me, as a Survivor player, you should always expect the worst, and a great example of that is Tony Vlachos. I know we're going back to Winners at War quite a lot, but I mean, if you're going to study the best, then you've got to study the best in regards to the game, right? And Tony Vlachos specifically goes to Sarah and to Ben saying Natalie might have an idol at that stage in the game when they don't believe it either. But he's always a player that prepares for the worst. He's always thinking, but what if worst case this is the case here? And I feel like if you're in the game, there's a balance. You can't always think the worst of every single situation, otherwise you'll never sleep. But you've got to be careful, and she's not seen as being careful enough in this regard. Harry is crafty. Why was he so ballsy in the previous tribal? I would be asking, it makes sense if you've got an idol, you're going to try and put targets on people. You're going to try and put the target on yourself so you can play an idol successfully. So all the warning signs are out there at the moment that he potentially has an idol. But anyways, we go into the tribal here, and Jonathan, actually, there's one specific part just before we get into tribal. I just glanced over it on my notes that I really want to touch on. It's a really funny scene with Harry going up to Ross, talking to Ross about,
Harry and Ross.
who you're going to vote for, who you're going to vote for. And Ross doesn't really want to give him anything, but at the end he does say, can I have your socks? Which I just thought is so funny.
That's right. Ross, I mean, as much as you got to love him, his head really isn't in the game here. He's just having fun. He doesn't care about that $500,000 check at the end of the day. He just wants to make as much chaos as possible and maybe keep his feet warm as well.
Yeah, he's the agent of chaos in this season for sure. Now, we go to the tribal, and Jonathan continues to ask Harry about the nickname Godmother that he gave to Janine, and Harry continues to go in on Janine here, saying that she's the person running the tribe. Janine's really sweating bullets. She's not liking the pressure and the publicity that she's getting from Harry, and obviously she doesn't want her game to be burned, because if he puts that narrative out there in Survivor, it's like wildfire. People are going to start thinking you are the one running the game, and then you become the biggest target when they need to start turning on each other. But she continues to go on about how she runs a business. It's very different. She's got a collaborative approach of working with her people. She doesn't order people on what to do. And she says that Harry can't be trusted. He's a liar. He just lied about his kid.
That's right. Harry has exposed himself in the previous tribal council as being a liar. He really is on the bottom here, but somehow he's managing to scramble and keep himself alive. And it is a smart decision by Harry to pin that on the godmother, Janine. Even if he does go home here or in the next couple of tribal councils, because we know he has an idol, little does Janine know that though, that by pinning the target on Janine, it's really going to plant seeds of dissent in everyone else's minds. And hopefully he can get out his number one enemy in the game. But we also see that Maddie is really throwing Casey under the bus here, which I find quite strange. I mean, you're gunning for Janine while you're throwing your other tribe mate under the bus. And perhaps that does speak to the fact that no one can trust her. She's going in between both alliances.
Yeah, I found it very interesting. It's definitely one of the points I highlighted here as well, because, in this tribal, I feel like the way that the show was edited, it portrayed Casey being this very diplomatic person, agreeing with both sides when they were saying things in very strategic ways and sounding very diplomatic, very neutral throughout the whole sort of process of being inside a tribal. But then you just see Matt getting annoyed and thinking to himself, "Nah, I'm over this. You're the one who told us that there was going to be someone throwing the challenge, or that the champions will throw the challenge." And he does get backed by Harry, which I found interesting that both of them did this, because it starts shifting the target kind of away from Harry, which the whole plan up until this point was, let's have the target be Harry so he can play as idol. So I feel like that kind of showed us that those three, they kind of imploded themselves a little bit there in that tribal, because to me there was a way out, but Casey was really the person who's kind of stuffed it up for them just by running back and forth between the alliances, not showing that she can be trustworthy. And probably at the end, it got to the point where Harry and Matt were like, well, we can't help her. We can't defend her. We can't trust her. So we're just going to set the record straight here.
That's right. Had she not gone scurrying back and forth, I mean, perhaps they could have pulled off the blindside and got rid of the godmother. I mean, it really would have been a good move, but obviously Casey's just really ruined everything for her. And we do see that she's denying, saying that she told the previous contenders that the champions were trying to throw the challenge. So she's clearly lying here. She's clearly backpedaling. No one trusts her at all. So perhaps it is the best decision to get her out of here right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, at the end of the day, we do see that the vote ends up going to Harry. So I believe that he played as idol and he received some votes there. But Casey is the one ultimately that gets the boot, because they were smart enough to put some votes there as well. And she ends up going. So if you think about the scenario here, all Casey had to do, because they had to split their votes, right? So it was a 3-2 vote. All they had to do was Harry plays that idol. He gets the 3 votes, which he does get in this case, 3 votes. Their 3 votes would have decided who went home. If Casey was smart enough to stick with Harry's plan would have worked. So it's a lot of could have, should have's. Didn't happen in this episode, and we do see Casey going home and being the next person evicted. Now, Riley, up until this point, who do you give the award to in both tribes here? Who do you think's playing the best game at this stage of the game?
From these last two episodes we've seen, I think I've got to give it to Sean at the moment. I mean, he really has just integrated himself in the Champions Tribe. He's exposed David. You know, David's starting to be on the back foot. And really, Sean's in a great position to go far in this game, I think, if he can maintain those social relationships and not be viewed as too big of a physical threat. But obviously, we'll see how it plays out down the line.
Yeah, and if you look at the Contenders Tribe, who would you say in the Contenders Tribe's playing a great game at the moment?
Maybe not Ross, but I think the Pia is certainly pulling the strings behind the scenes, perhaps. I mean, we do have a really good threesome here between Janine, Abby, and Pia. All of them seem to be in cohesion with everyone, in sync. It's a question of who's really calling the shots. I think it might be a coalition between Janine and Pia calling the shots, but I think that no one's really viewing her as a threat at the moment. So it will be interesting to see how she goes. Everyone seems to love her as well. There's no real target on her, whereas Janine kind of has that pinned on her back as being the godmother. So she seems to be in a good position. No one hates her at the moment. It'll be interesting to see where she goes from here as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. So if I had to look at the two tribes at this stage, I think Sean's playing a great game. I do think that when you're taking your shots at someone as big as David, you know, you've got to land them. And if I look at the whole season up until this point and how David has played, I do still give David a little bit of an edge over Sean, but I actually think Luke's playing the best game. And I'll tell you why I think Luke's playing the best game. He's not receiving a lot of airtime in these recent episodes, but clearly he's loved enough by that old Contenders Tribe that they weren't going to risk putting a vote on him in the previous episode. They actually had Hannah as the second person. So I feel like Luke's got a lot of inroads there. He's seen as loved by the old champions in the Contenders Tribe, and also he's got the relationships on that side with the contenders, with people like Daisy and that. I feel like whatever David's doing, they're not looking at David and Luke as a pair. They're looking at David as being yes, they're a pair in the voting block, but they're looking at David as the really poisonous car salesy type of person that they need to vote out and they can't trust. But for some other reason, people are forgetting that Luke's a snake as well. And I feel like he just hides it a lot better with his way of doing things, you know?
That's right. And I think that might come down to the way Luke plays the game socially. I mean, who doesn't love Luke? He really has set himself up really well here in playing behind David as the meat shield. And while he might not be calling the shots, and David certainly seems to be in charge, he's not paying the target on his back. So he does seem to be in a pretty good position here on the champions as well. I mean, no one's really looking at him at the moment. And it is that stage set between David and Sean. Goliath versus Goliath in this instance. So yeah, no, I think Luke does have potential to go a long way in this game, especially when you look at the previous season with Russell Hantz. I mean, this previous player has come back into the game and he's playing flawlessly, but no one can see it.
Yeah, I mean, it should be dangerous for them getting Luke to go this far in the game, get this close to the merge, know that he's got a compelling story to tell at the end of the game. You know, like in the US, if somebody knew Luke's backstory, he would be voted out anywhere close. You know, they probably wouldn't even allow him to get to the merge because they would be so afraid of that story making it to the end because people will want to vote for him. But somehow people are looking past that and they just really enjoy spending time with Luke on the island. But I feel like Luke has played really well because we saw a lot of him in the beginning of this season. He's taken a bit of a backseat in recent times. He's let David run a lot of the things, let David make a lot of noise, but we know he's a capable player. We know that there's more to come from him, surely, at this stage. You know, he's just been really angry at himself for using his idol when he shouldn't have. He said that this is the time to do the comeback. So I feel like there's foreshadowing being set up here by the show to tell us that there's more with Luke coming in the next episodes. And if we look at the Contenders Tribe, I'm with you on the best player sitting somewhere in between the three girls. It's very hard to determine which one of those three girls are actually playing the best game. Janine is too visible. She's starting to take a lot of bullets, so it probably lies somewhere between Abby and Pia for me as well. Just not to be the same as you, I'll probably go for Abby because I feel like Abby has still got a really good in with David. She's got a better relationship with David, I feel like, than the other two girls, and she's also got a pretty good relationship with Simon and Ross, and she seems to be the girl that gets along with the guys really well, so I feel like she's in a good position there as well. But any of those three girls, I like them for that side at the moment. They're playing a good game. They're clearly in charge of the game up until this point. Now, Riley, it's been great talking to you about these two episodes, and an hour has gone by so quickly. I can't believe that it's already been just past an hour that we've talked. I do want to go through a couple of episodes coming up on Reality Pop. We do have Chantel Francis returning with The Block, which is Big Brother Canada's after show, and that will be on Wednesday in the US and Canada. That's followed by the Survivor Buffs on Thursday over in the US and Canada, and they're going to be talking about the future of every Winners at War contestant, featuring Eager Turtle on there with them as well to talk about that. I'm looking forward to hearing why Adam is the person that's going to come back, because we all know he's the one that deserves it the most. And then on Friday, we've got the top 10 Survivor Wholesome Friendships, which should be really interesting. I did have one vote in that, but don't blame me if you don't agree with all of that. And then on Saturday or Sunday, depending on where you are. Sunday, if you're in Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, I will be back to do another rewind episode with Caesar on that one. And we're also going to have Survivor Chronicles Clay Jordan interview that will come out with the Survivor Buffs interviewing Clay Jordan. So there's a lot to look forward to. There is a few international survivors that we will be getting on the show soon as well. So as soon as I've got more more dates locked in, I will definitely make you guys aware of it. But we do have a few from this season and a few Survivor South Africa players that will come on the show, maybe even some winners. So really looking forward to that. Riley, this has been great, mate. Do you have anything that you want to make people aware of over here? Any handles, anything? I know you've said Snuffed is your YouTube channel. You've got a bit of content coming out there. Anything else?
Yep. Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube at Snuffed, SNUFFED, just like it's spelled on the show. Not how Naoka spells it on Nicaragua, though. We have 2 videos coming out each week, winners' journeys and also just regular videos. So please join us for that. It'd be really appreciated. We love the community here, and I love interacting with all you guys as well.
And for those of you who really enjoyed Riley on this episode, don't worry, he's back next week, and we will be doing another one at the same time next week. So keep a lookout for that. Thanks, guys. It's been great. Talk to you soon. Bye.